Yeah, where is it?
It's over here. Follow me.
After we do that.
Are we in?
We're in. You're live.
We got anybody here yet? Hi, everybody. It's David Sereda, davidsereda.co. So today, I've really been prompted to have this talk, and I've seen the huge, amount of people we're losing to fentanyl and also other overdosing, drugs as a form, in my opinion, a form of suicide intentionally, and in some cases not intentionally. And I'm going to kind of talk today about first a little bit about why people are so attracted to different types of drugs and plant-based medicines. And when I say medicine, I mean medicine. I don't know how many of you saw the series on Netflix called, How to Change Your Mind. It's a very, very profound series on the use of psychoactive chemicals, DMT, LSD, and mescaline, and which originally have their basis in plants. For example, even LSD has a basis in a mold that grows on wheat. And so, what? And I had this amazing conversation with my dad. I wish I could have my dad here because my dad is a PhD in psychology from UC Berkeley in educational psychology. And as a kid growing up with him and my dad teaching us how to learn how to meditate, over 45 years ago, I was first introduced to the practice of meditation. And my dad saw, us kids, four boys experimenting with different things in high school. And he'd have these talks with me, and the talks with me really turned me around to see that not only are we, and you'll see here why people are attracted to certain drugs because they have an inability to access that certain state of consciousness that drug can give them. A lot of drugs are social coping because they take the edge off the fear of communicating and opening up to others. And so I'm going to go into that, but I'm really going to focus more on the process of meditation and opening and conscious naturally without the need to use any of these extensive psychoactive chemicals and chemistry to produce sufficient states of consciousness where we feel at ease and we can actually feel a fullness and eventually reach true radiant bliss states that are actually way beyond any of the drugs that are out there. And what I've seen is I know many people who've been practicing. I mean, seriously practicing. I'm not talking loosely. I mean, I've been meditating, doing breath work and sound and frequency work every single day for 45 years. I don't miss a day of my practice. The benefits are so astounding that if you were to compare, if you were 45 years ago, let's say you invested $10,000 in gold. And I like to use gold as an analogy because there's the mythic story of the philosopher's stone, and whoever finds the secret to the philosopher's stone can turn the base metals to gold or attain the state of gold radiant consciousness. And you're going to see what my interpretation of the philosopher's stone really is, and the alchemical process of transforming the human solid stone-like consciousness into radiant gold is the real alchemy, not so much the alchemy of physically turning base metals into gold. And the mythic story is really an inner story. and that when we're born, when we come into this world, there's no guarantee that we will be in a state of happiness even as a child. In fact, there are many children that not long after they're born that they're not really that happy. Although children have an ability to move from crying their eyes out to laughing very quickly, and they have this kind of fluidity, liquid like quality in their ego, in that their ego egg is not a solid rock yet. It's very malleable, changeable. In fact, children are born with millions and millions of potential open neural pathways. And as we start going into our education process, rational, logical education, we start shutting down those potential millions of infinite neural pathways, and we become very narrowband focused. Actually, we teach our students in school yes or no, correct, right and wrong answered questions, and so the yes or no and the memorization of information and fact starts to produce a rational, logical approach to knowledge and gnosis, rather than a real feeling based learning where you're actually experiencing what you're learning as true rather than what you're experiencing as learning as fact or false, right? So we start out, we're born in this state that where a child can reach bliss and terror and discomfort. And what I've noticed with my children is once they get close to the teen years, they start to understand boredom. And my dad taught me in meditation, boredom is a feeling. It's an actual feeling, and it happens to be the most powerful feeling initially, because when we start to go from this wide open state, like I'll give you an example. My daughter Alira is now almost 12, and my daughter Staria just turned 7 on September 11th. And I remember this experience with my wife when she was alive, that my daughter Alira climbed this little tree in the park, and we couldn't get her out of this little tree literally for 4 hours. 4 hours. And if I tried to get her out of the tree, she would flip out. She was having an experience in the tree, and therefore could not possibly experience boredom at that age, which was about the age of 7 when Alira had this experience. And she started describing seeing this golden light, the golden radiant mind. And she was so entranced in the feeling based experience of the tree, not unlike the Buddha meditating under the Bodhi tree and attaining nirvana, and Jesus meditating under the olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane. She was having a very advanced feeling based perception of nature. So we just let her. It was cold actually, and we wanted to go home, but and our youngest wasn't born yet. She was not going to get out of the tree. See what happens when the ego starts to form, and we're no longer malleable, changeable. We become very rigid and literally like a stone. And when the stone, or the ego, the solid perception of self, stares within and you close your eyes, what you see is infinite emptiness. But the perception of the void within is a negative, meaning it's not pleasurable. It is negative, empty, meaning it has no content, no feeling. It might have peace, it might have a sense of rest, but it is certainly not filled with a positive presence. And therefore, there are many people teaching an enlightenment that is the realization of emptiness, which is the Buddhist notion, which is not a negative realization of emptiness, which is the same as the Hebrew God saying that thou shalt have no graven or carved images of the Lord thy God, or anything in the heavens above or the earth beneath, and you shall not fall down and worship them. See, the idea of creating imagery to represent angels or God is the beginning of mythic entertainment, because the void within is so powerful. It's the most powerful, because our reaction to seeing, when we close our eyes and seeing emptiness as no content, is the mirror of the creativity force that causes all entertainment, music, movies, singing, dancing, skateboarding. You can go on and on and on. You can say that all entertainment is there so that you don't get bored, right? Because when you look within, what do you see? You see nothing. So you say, I'm bored. And it's really funny when your children tell you, I'm bored. I think it's hilarious. I never get bored myself, but I've been meditating for 45 years. And when I meditate now, and this, of course, is not easy to do this. I mean, I've spent thousands of hours in meditation where I'm staring like a stone into the vastness of the emptiness, and all I see is emptiness. And this is one of the conversations that Eckhart Tolle has with his students, is when you look within and you realize you are that vast emptiness, but how long can you look at it? And when he says that, and there comes a point when you look at it and you're trying to pierce it and see, is there anything that is of real substance here, or is it the birth of all entertainment so that you don't have to face it? And that includes all entertainment. And boy, is that powerful, right? Because you look at the creation of the universe and how the holographic universe is a reflection out of the void, and physicists are starting to see that our whole galaxy may be a holographic projection coming out of black holes, is a reaction to saying, I don't want to experience boredom and emptiness. I want entertainment. And so once you've been here long enough and you've gone through all the different forms of entertainment, and boy, do I ever wonder how some people can do it, a whole lifetime of watching sports and things like that. And I just go, wow. I mean, 60 years of watching, games on the TV. And then what about when you reach 80 and then 90? What about if you had to spend 1,000 years doing that? So I mean all forms of entertainment. So that's food entertainment, sex entertainment, movie entertainment, fear-based entertainment. All the forms of entertainment are generally producing an adrenaline response of the adrenal glands to give you some sort of a high or a low, because sometimes people are looking for a real low and they want to experience a real downer emotion, and that's in the category of all the different types of drugs, right? So if you go to marijuana is actually a downer opener. It's a relaxant. It can make you feel really plugged in and connected and relaxed. I did a lot of it in high school when I lost my mother and my wife at about the age of 12. And I cried so much for several years. And I found this to be very helpful because it was a downer opener. Cocaine is an upper. It's a social coping drug that takes the edge completely off, and you'll find yourself talking to just about anybody because you don't have any protection around yourself anymore. You become really open, which is why it was a very successful drug at sweeping the world in nightclubs, because it took the edge off of people meeting each other. Now, alcohols are also social coping drugs in that they can be downers or uppers. Like beer is a downer, wine is a downer, but gin and tonic and vodka is an upper, right? But they're social coping. They take the edge off, which is why people do them. When you get into DMT and ayahuasca and you get into the psychedelic family of drugs like acid, you're getting into an attraction because there are many people who because of years and years of rational logical learning, they've lost their ability to see in their mind's eye geometries and visions and the ability to build things or invent things within the mind, or to have revelation and actually see that revelation as a luminous form within the mind. So the psychedelic drugs, people get attracted to those who don't have the ability to do that naturally. And believe me, in our civilization, we lose most of the abilities to do these things. Like when I was a kid, and this was in high school, I would go to sleep and the lights would be completely black in my room, and it looked like somebody was shining car headlights in my eyes. It was so bright because my pineal gland in the center of my brain was so photoelectric at that age. It just shined with amazing amounts of bright light. And this was a regular experience that I had for years and years and years. And of course, I'm starting meditation at the age of 12. It's when my dad first got me into it. And my brothers too. Now, fentanyl, I remember when fentanyl was legal, my dentist, because I had a brutal tooth problem, gave me a fentanyl-based painkiller. And when I first took it, I thought, wow, this is an incredible high. This is what I feel like when I'm meditating, except the meditating is better than this fentanyl high. And the fentanyl is expansive beyond body feeling, where you feel that you're no longer trapped in the stone of the ego self, the stone that can't see anything beyond the surface of the skin. It can't feel anything beyond the surface of the skin. It can see when the eyes are open. It has a feeling of spaciousness if you're in nature or climbing a mountain. But the general feeling when you look within is that of that there's no perception beyond the skin. And so the fentanyl makes you feel you're in the expanded field feeling. And that is probably why it is so pervasive in our culture today, and so many people are becoming addicted to it. And heroin, which is an opiate as well as fentanyl, is the same. It's a very similar thing. Now, I haven't done heroin, but I can tell you from people I've talked to who have, it's very similar. Now, when my dentist gave me my next dose of my fentanyl for my tooth, because I was waiting to get, an operation on my tooth, each time I took it, the quality of the high went down, 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 down. Pretty soon, it couldn't do it anymore. Now, I know this from Alex Gray and his experience with DMT. His original first experiences were not repeatable, meaning that every time he did it after that, from what he described to me, I interviewed him on camera many, many years ago for a film called The Mystic Artist with my friend Andre Henderson, and he described how he wasn't even attracted to doing it anymore because he couldn't duplicate his first experience. This is really, really key in understanding this. So the ego is literally the stone. It is the stone solid consciousness that is waiting to be reborn. Hence Jesus saying that you need to be born again, is that the birth of the child and the solidification of the pineal gland turns into a calcified stone in the center of the head. It's normally a liquid fluid-like chemical gland that emits photoluminous light into the brain. And that photoluminous light, if it's merged with consciousness, can produce the most beautiful electric glowing visions within consciousness. So that now that it's
so that stone in the pineal gland is the ego?
It's part of the ego because the light of, remember, Jesus said in Matthew 6:22, the light of the body is the eye, and if your eye becomes single, your whole body shall be filled with light.
Right.
And that's a very, very deep parable, because becoming single means to end the conflict within and to become coherent, because singularity consciousness is such high focus coherence, and to reach the coherent state of mind, to dissolve the stone is the goal. And once you've dissolved the stone, when you stare into the void, it is not an infinitely vast empty, as in negative empty, meaning no content. It's actually infinite bliss. And the bliss is love and bliss all the same, because true love has no suffering within it. And really, and this is in Saint Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle, that human love is full of thorns, in that it's full of the ego's, pleasure and pain, addiction, and it's not pure love, because it contains suffering, about as much suffering as it has pleasure. And you can see anybody who's been in a relationship long enough can tell you that the romantic stage starts to die off, and then you get into these dynamics with your partner, and you start to see that what appeared to be a temporary opening of the ego to merge with this other person eventually has problems. And that's because they have the ego too. So the ego is literally like an egg, in that it is closed. The chicken hasn't been born yet. It hasn't broken out of the shell. And so when that stone like mind stares into the void, it's almost scary, because you can do what Eckhart Tolle says, close your eyes, put your hands out, and say, I'm infinite space. Now let's see how long you can do that without either getting bored, or let's do another experiment. Let's look at a beautiful tree in the fall with all of its yellow leaves. Okay, let's see how long you can look at that tree and say, oh my God, this tree is so incredibly beautiful. Just watch, because what happens very quickly is that's an entertainment, because you're only seeing the entertainment part of the tree, because the tree is entertaining you on the outside with the scenery. And pretty soon you're bored, and you want to go do something else. So the boredom is the veil between the ego and what appears to be the void. Now remember, when God says in the laws of Moses that are given in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt have no images of the Lord thy God, and no carved images of anything, and you shall not bow down and worship them, because God knows that's not God. Because the real meaning of the tetragrammaton, the 4 letters that you can't pronounce, it means I am that I am, or I am that which came into being. And so when you look in yourself and you see your pure I amness, because God planted the seed of God in every one of us, that's your gateway to the infinite presence within. But again, when you first look at it, you get bored. So you're gonna let's say you're gonna meditate for 5 minutes, and some people say, oh, I can't meditate because there's so much going on in my head. There's so many thoughts. I'm thinking so many things. So how do you pray to God when God says you can't have any images of the Lord thy God? So God is really void, right? Because that statement says that the pure I amness of your consciousness has no form. and does it have sound? Because does it have anything to entertain you while you look at it? So you're going to pray to God, but how do you pray to God when the definition of God is pure I amness? And believe me, this took me decades of meditation practice. It's not easy to do this. You have to be committed in your life to be able to do this. Like, so when Jesus spoke the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, it was, O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms with sound, light, and vibration. May you touch me in my utmost holiest. Let your will come true in all is material and dense. So we have the breath, the sound, and the light. The breath, the sound, and the light as a method of prayer. So the sound part is extant. It has been removed from from the practice of prayer, and that there are very clear inscriptions in the earliest Christian manuscripts that we can get our hands on, that there was a practice that involved breath and involved toning frequencies. And then, of course, we also see there were two tools that were major tools that God gave Moses. One is the Holy of Holies cubic temple, because the temple has a function of frequency, and the staff, which every single prophet had, and Jesus said in Mark 6:1-8, that all the apostles had to have their staff with them when he dispersed them, is another tool, which is a frequency tool. So how do you take the stone and get it to open up so that when it stares into the void, it actually experiences infinite consciousness so deep that you don't want to get out of the tree? So remember, my daughter Lyra was in the tree for 4 hours, and the Buddha is meditating under the Bodhi tree, and Jesus is praying on the trees in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the experience is so deep that it transcends all entertainment value. So when I go into this state every day, and more than anything, I want to teach and share with other people how you can go into this state yourself and experience the real God, and why nearly 100 million Americans are no longer identifying themselves with any religion, let alone that they were formerly Christian. This is new news from the Pew Charitable Trust. I think I posted it here on my Facebook. Really shocking news that this massive number of people are dropping out of religion and calling themselves atheists because they can't feel God in the church. They can't feel God anywhere. They can't feel it. And if they can't have the experience and touch it and get their hands on it, it isn't real. And they're tired of, belief structures, believing in God or having faith. You're still faith in a way, you're still a blind person, because you have faith that God is there, and that's a good thing, but you can't feel it. Not really. You can feel it sometimes, but in other times you can't. And then you ask God for something and God doesn't give it to you, and God gives you something else. And you say, why did you give me that? I asked for this. So then we start getting mad at the supposed God in our head for sending us the wrong thing, or not. There's this promise in the scriptures where Jesus says, anything you ask for, you will receive and more if you ask in my name, it's going through me to the Father, you'll receive this. And then that doesn't happen, right?
I watched something interesting yesterday where this kid basically starts this cult and says, God talks to me. So all these people join this cult. And then this psychiatrist comes along and says, well, no, God's not talking to you. You have a tumor in your whatever he said the tumor was in. And sure enough, he has a seizure in the show. And then they find this tumor, even though nobody believed that the psychiatrist knew that there was a tumor. Any comment?
Well, when God appears to Moses in the burning bush, of course, the burning bush is a metaphor for a bush that's glowing with light. And there are many, many interpretations of this, but the vastness, there is no person that we can see in the Tetragrammaton other than there's this infinite flame, an infinite spirit of God that can manifest, and Jesus is and is the manifestation of the Son of God walking on the earth, and we have the prophets who spoke to God. But so when God speaks through a person, how do we know it's God or it's not some abstraction? In this case, the tumor, or perhaps it is God. We don't know. And when Neil Donald Walsh wrote his Conversations with God, again, it swept the world because everyone wanted to know what God would say, right? But God's word, which is really the vibration that is causing and maintaining the creation, isn't isn't a spoken language the way we think of. But once you get to this state where the stone is now dissolved, it's no longer solid, like a solid structure. The presence of God is so beyond the ability of a tiny human to partake of that even the tiniest percent of it would blind a person. And what I'm experiencing is the ecstasy, joy, love is not like a little high that peaks and goes away. It stays there the whole time I'm in meditation prayer. And this extremely bright light appears right around the top of the crown coming in. But it's infinite. It's not a local consciousness, but it enters the body through the crown and the heart. And it is extremely, extremely challenging to stay in it. And I ask God every day, how much more is there? How much more? And this is in, there are many accounts of this in the early Christian testimonies where Jesus transfigures like the sun, and the disciples fall at his feet and say, we can't bear this. Please stop, because there's more glory than we can possibly withstand. So that's the point of true humility. You become humble before God, not because of fear, but because God can fill you with more, the purest love and joy, that when you go to, okay, let's look at entertainment, and I mean all entertainment, and let's look at how much value comes out of that entertainment, and then look at when I compare it to what I'm feeling, I can literally see now the human, what is known as the body of sin, is really like an animal. It's a very lower consciousness functioning thing that we will be saved from when we're resurrected in the new body, become born again, and you're filled with the Spirit of God. It dwarfs, like a supernova, the value of all of those entertainments. And so when I talk to people today who are doing things like psychoactive chemicals and who are becoming addicted to things like fentanyl, I ask them, what is drawing you to do this? And the answer I get, I talk to a lot of them, is the state they're experiencing in the day. Once they try this drug, it takes them to a place that the former can no longer compare to. And in fact, all forms of entertainment can't compare to what it feels like to be that free and that full in their spirit, that they're no longer bound to this mortal flesh, this animal that seeks food, shelter, architecture, sex, entertainment all day long to so that it doesn't have to face boredom. God forbid it should face the boredom. Now, the way to penetrate the what is called the boredom layer, which is when you look at the void within and it is void, meaning it's a negative void. There's nothing there. It's empty. And so that's not what the Buddhists mean by realization of emptiness. What the Buddhists mean by realization of emptiness is actually the same thing as the Hebrew God saying you should have no images of the Lord thy God. Because when you become coherent, which means you're applying your mind to focus on the internal state, it's actually takes tremendous patience to learn how do you become coherent so that you can pierce the veil and the void is no longer a negative empty. It's a positive, infinitely blissful state. And when I was in this state this morning, because when the state comes over me, I have no control of when it's going to happen. It just starts, and then I'll stop what I'm doing, like doing the dishes or getting my kids ready for school, and I'll sit in meditation, and it happens right away, within minutes. There is so much supreme ecstasy and love that it is beyond my capacity as a human, so much so that at a certain point I'm so full, and I say to God, I can't take any more. Literally, it's that full. And if I compare, when I was a high school student, I tried all these different drugs. They're all completely a waste of time by comparison. And when I tell people that today, who have done ayahuasca and things like this, I asked them, like, what did you feel when you did this? Did you feel supreme ecstasy? And most of them will say no. I said, then, well, what did you feel? And why was it so liberating for you? So it's because the stone, the mind, again, when you look at children, look how quickly they can laugh and how quickly they can be crying. You can see very quickly they can go into this into the beginning of this state, but then they're going to lose it because they'll come upon in their teen years and they'll say, I'm bored. And out of the boredom, I mean, how many people who are parents out there have their kids on who are addicted to devices, right? Electronic devices, because they don't want to face their boredom. And so in a way, the void animated the desire to seek pleasure and entertainment. It is the creative force of all creativity, and it actually has a beautiful reaction because everything we created, everything is to entertain us and sustain us. But even our food, our cuisine, we like really fine cuisine. We like things to taste a certain way. So you have a little bit of mustard and a little bit of ketchup on your veggie dog or your hot dog, and a little bit of this cheese and not that cheese. My daughters are so particular. If it's the wrong cheese, they'll throw the whole thing out. So that's what I mean. But if you understand what is the secret, I mean, I've been meditating for so many years, so many decades, and there's so many techniques I did with so many teachers that didn't really do anything other than allow me to stare endlessly at the void. And you're watching your breath's going up, your breath's going down, and seeing the void within, emptiness within. I've done years of that. But what allows you to penetrate and to cause this quality in the mind to become coherent. And coherency is like, instead of one wave at a certain frequency, it's like millions of waves at the same frequency. What causes coherency is frequency. And frequency, even though itself, so let's say you listen to 432 hertz. I'll just give you an example. But your mind is scattered all over the place where you're listening to it. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you apply your mind and your toning, and you can go deeper with this because there's many layers to how to go deeper and deeper with frequency. Your mind starts to become coherent, and the coherency is where you start. The stone no longer, it starts dissolving, and when the stone dissolves and the shell of the egg starts to dissolve, the light starts to shine in. And when it comes in, and I know there are countless numbers of people who have had this experience, and then it happens, and it's the most blissful experience of their life, and then they go into absolute terror, fear, and then they also don't know how to get it back. It's happened to me the first time it happened. My dad was leading a meditation retreat, and I was meditating, 10 hours a day, and my legs were burning, my back hurt like crazy, and kaboom, I went into this incredible open state of infinite, boundless bliss consciousness. And when you're in this state, you can actually feel everything. So you're actually haven't escaped. You're actually inside of everything, and you're actually having true relation with everything. You're seeing all people as their God self. You are seeing a tree and a rock as
So when you
God
experienced
self.
the bliss, you were still experiencing the pain in your legs and the heat in your back.
No,
etc.?
it just goes away in an instant. It's like it evaporated in an instant. And I got up and I went into the park and looked at the willow trees. I actually could hear the sound of the sun in that state. I could hear it. And this was a decade or so before NASA released the recording of the sound of the sun. I could actually hear it happening, because when you're in the field, the infinite field, it's way beyond entertainment. You're actually feeling everything. An empath, let's talk about empathy. Empathy is the ability to feel somebody else's feelings And that means their suffering and their joy. But when you first start empathing, a lot of people's, downers can really bring you down. They can really affect you. And even their darkness can really affect you. But when you become firmly rooted in the infinite bliss, nothing can touch you. And I mean nothing. I've tested this state so that I've tried to destroy it, where I wanted to see how unconditional this God state is. Because if it's conditional, then I still haven't reached much of anything. Because if you can upset it, and if you eat the wrong food and you come crashing down, you're nowhere, right? Because Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, when asked what should we eat, he said, don't eat what you don't like, because this doesn't have anything to do with food. This is the Spirit of God, which transcends all flesh, all suffering. So if you're still identifying with the suffering of a creature that you're eating, and that upsets you, then you're still in the emotional trauma-based body, because the infinite consciousness doesn't experience suffering at all. That's why in the Acts of John, banned by Pope Leo the Great, and I read the Acts of John, segments of it in a previous appearance, where Jesus did not suffer on the cross at all, because he's God, and God is not suffering. God doesn't identify. There is no suffering anywhere inside of the God field. So when you're in the God field, you don't suffer. Even if you've got nails and spikes going through your skin, you don't actually suffer. So the point is, can you disrupt it by doing certain things, right? And I found that it didn't matter what I did when I went back to meditate, even if I really pissed somebody off, right? If I really upset somebody and they thought I was a terrible person because I did this, I went back to meditate. It's still there. Infinite shining bliss, because it's unconditional. And this is one of the things that students of meditation masters have got wrong. They think their master has to live up to their conditions to be a master. They think if you break one of these conditions and you're not a vegetarian, you could not possibly be enlightened. Meanwhile, I was with the Dalai Lama in India, and he's saying, he's not a vegetarian at all. In fact, most of the Tibetans are not vegetarians. But so somebody would say, well, if you're a vegan, you would say, oh, how could somebody be enlightened if they eat fish or they had a hamburger? So, and most likely Jesus, being a Jew, would have clearly eaten lamb and had fish. We know he ate fish. He fed the masses with fish and loaves of bread. So he wasn't a vegan, and he wasn't a vegetarian either. So again, I have tested this, and I've tested it with as many forms of destructions that I can to see if it's destructible. And it is indestructible. It doesn't care whether I upset somebody's feelings that day. I mean, I know stories. I mean, I can tell you amazing stories. Like Muktananda did crazy things to his disciples, and still he goes into the supreme state. And that's because the state does bring a natural morality. It does bring a feeling that you eventually realize, I don't want to eat meat. I just don't like the vibration of it. But it's not a judgment. There's a difference when it's a judgment and when it's an observation. Totally different. So what I found, and I've been going into this state every day for over 5 years, sometimes twice a day, with my kids running around, sometimes climbing all over me. Nothing can disturb it, not even noise, not even my dog jumping up on me when I'm sitting in the chair meditating. My dog jumps up on me. It doesn't stop it. And again, I've tried everything to see if there's a way to offend it so that it would go away. So I would know God doesn't like this, that, or this, or that, right? There's nobody judging you. This is the first thing to understand. Everything you're experiencing is not being judged, but the judgment is part of the knowledge of good and evil that causes us to judge what is good and what is evil. And because we disagree on what is right and what is wrong, we get into fights and wars, and we think we're better than the other guy. And so we do suffer because we take upon judgment. But this is different than allowing a rampant society to do whatever the heck it wants to do with no regard for anybody's feelings, because when the deeper you go into this state, you're feeling everybody, you're feeling everything. And eventually, when you realize how unconditional it is, it doesn't mean you're going to become a person who's going to do whatever the heck they want to do, no matter how much it upsets the students. Right? Even let's say driving around in a Rolls Royce, does that, or a BMW, does that change this consciousness? Does it say, shame on you for having a nice car, I'm going to put you down? See, there's nobody in control of your consciousness but you. See, we have this idea that if we do this, and this, if we do alternate nostril breathing, we do every yoga posture perfectly, we say the name of God perfectly, that suddenly the bliss comes. See, that's an idea that it's a consequence of conditions, that you have to meet all these conditions and you're a perfect vegan, and then ta-da, the bliss will come. I remember when I read this book with my first girlfriend called Survival in the 21st Century, where it was all about eating the purest foods and cleaning out the colon and having a perfectly healthy body, which we did. We did all these things. And I meditated every day. But still, the state that happens to me now never happened. There was peace, felt really good eating avocados and salads and mangoes and sunflower seeds. But this state I'm talking about did not happen. Because when you get into the game of thinking you have to reach conditions, then you've fallen into the trap that God is conditional. Condition all, that you have to get all the conditions right, and your salt has to be kosher, this has to be kosher, and then God will shine on you. Now, there's a reason for all those things, but those things, when you're inside the field and you see it and you're feeling it, you naturally, when you partake, just like the First Nations people did, they gave thanks to the Great Spirit for their food, because they felt it all as a living system, and they saw the gift that was given to them. There's a total difference when you're resonant and you look at your food. Today I had a veggie burger for lunch, and I see it as God giving me my meal, and I give thanks and seeing that it's all God. But see, there's a difference. If I do that as a ritual, thinking because I'm doing such a good job, God's then going to put the little magic wand on my third eye and suddenly I'm going to be in heaven. It doesn't work that way. It works when you understand that God is completely unconditional, and it's not that God loves you and doesn't love this person because you got it all right and they got it all wrong, and your conditions were more perfect than that person's. It's when you realize that it's right in front of you, it's right there, but the mind is not coherent because it's in a way it's trapped in a web, a spider's web of entertainment, because it can't become it's too impatient. It looks at the void. Okay, I see infinite mind, infinite space, and there's nothing there. So I'll do this for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go back to the basketball game, because I can listen to Eckhart Tolle and he can tell me about the infinite mind, and I can do that for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go back to the stock market, or I'm going to go back to seeking pleasure here, seeking pleasure there. See, that means when it's pierced, when the veil is pierced, what fills you dwarfs all entertainment. And if we're trapped in infinite entertainment, we won't give ourselves the time to do these practices that can it's a very slow process. Creating coherency in the mind is a long, slow process. But again, let's say when I go back to being a teenager, if I invested $10,000 in gold when I was a teenager. And then when I'm 60 years old, 65 years old, I reach retirement age, I say, how much is the gold worth and what kind of entertainment can it give me with if I spend all the money? Now, if I go to the same point when I'm a teenager and I meditate every day, I train my mind to become coherent. When I get to 60 years old, then I look at what I have. And believe me, there is nothing the gold can buy you. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing it can buy you that compares to what it feels like to be in the state of consciousness. And actually, what I've experienced when I was taken by Christ through the 7 levels of heavens is in each heaven, you're given a new body that is designed to withstand that superluminal state of divine love and ecstasy that conquers all suffering. There's no suffering at all in the heavens, but you have to be able to take it in and feel it, because what happens after death, Jesus told me, is we judge ourselves based on our ability, our inability to go up and raise our frequency and be in this state that dwarfs all entertainment. And it's funny when you see these arguments, and this is part of the study that Pew Charitable Trust did, is that there's a huge increase in satanic cults in America that are challenging and taking these young Christians away from the church into these cults, because they say that heaven doesn't have any entertainment. You're going to be so bored there, and you're going to get to, the devil was really got a bad deal, and really he's a great guy, and this is what you're going to get in hell, and you're going to have, naked girls and dancers and food and anything you want. But if you go to heaven, they're all bored and they're just singing songs up there. See, this is an absolute amateur interpretation of what it's really like. And this is why the church has failed. Why a massive, I think it's 30% of Americans are no longer identifying themselves with any religion, because they see, what is the entertainment value in heaven? What am I going to get to do there all day? Because it sounds really boring, and this, these cults on Satanism sound like there's a lot more to offer for me, what I'm looking for. And you can see that it's all based on entertainment value. So first of all, it's impossible to get bored in heaven. It's impossible, even in the first heaven, that the content value of any form of entertainment, any form, sex entertainment, food entertainment, race car entertainment, speed entertainment, war entertainment, all the entertainments, the content value of the high that you get from adrenaline. And in war, there's extreme adrenaline. It's one of the highs that happen on the battlefield. But that extreme adrenaline entertainment does not compare in content. If you test it to the presence that is the God presence in heaven, it doesn't even, if you could feel it for 10 seconds, the real heaven, the real God, and then you're going to go feel your adrenaline based high, which you can get from sports and extreme sex, and you'll just say,
how do you get past that experience of boredom? Because boredom will get you to stop and do something else, or boredom will get
right.
you.
And I know that is the ultimate question. It is, how can you get there quicker, right? And that's why a lot of people have taken to DMT and these, because they think they're getting to the ultimate faster. I read this incredible book by Brian Murawski on his theory that the early Christian sacraments were hallucinogenic, brewed wafers that contained, a hallucinogen to give them a mystical experience so they would become Christian. And even though there might have been some of that in the early church, the very first Christians guaranteed, if you really read the the Gnostic scriptures of the first Christians, they were experiencing what I'm talking about. And Jesus could, on the moment of the baptism, they would have this experience. In fact, John the Baptist had a cult that was so massive as a prophet of the real God that people lined up every weekend to get baptized again and again and again because they wanted to repeat the experience he could give them through the baptism. So the baptism in the beginning was so pure that it was actually an experience. And there are many Christians today who can tell you that when they go down in the water and come up, they have an experience that is beyond words, that they can't compare it to anything in their life. But then there's people who go down, and like Graham Hancock describes in his book, that going into a church as a kid was completely boring. And Brian Morawski can tell you the same thing in his book. So what is missing? How do we get past the veil, where when you first stare into your inner infinite void, your own I am, it's not just an empty, meaning no content, void. It takes patience and it takes perseverance, and it is definitely, our culture does not support it at all. So there's nothing in our culture that gives you spaces where you can go learn how to do this, other than going to church on Sunday and confessing your sins. I've seen Christians, fully on fire, feeling really high in church with the singing, and it does take them to a certain place. But then why is it that there is this massive failure for people today to be turning their back? Because one, we saw the priests abusing minors, but not only minors, the priests are abusing, and even pastors are abusing their congregation sexually and financially. There's a lot of financial abuse in the church, and there's a lot of abuse where the pastor will try to steal money from the congregation for his and his family's own financial gain. And all those forms of abuses added up and become, evident in the media, I think is one of the main reasons people are turning away, because they say, well, if the pastor isn't feeling the presence of God, then he doesn't even know how to take us there, because he or she's not even able to do it themselves. And they're falling into the same game of needing all this money for the purpose of entertainment, because they can't see God. I think that's where a lot of it is. But now you have this huge, I've only got a few more minutes now because I have to leave this. And I think that maybe the next time I'll go deeper into each one of these drugs, and why this is happening, and talking to some of the people who are attracted to the fentanyls is because it does give them a feeling of expansive awareness beyond the body, so that they know that they're not just the ego, this solid structure that has to think and memorize facts and do a job. There's something much more expansive than that, and it does give them a little bit of it. I can tell you, from having done it by accident from my dentist giving it to me, that the state of meditation is gets millions of times better than that, if you can withstand millions of times better. But just the moment of being liberated from the mind being bound into the flesh, and to know you're actually a spiritual infinite being, they do feel something like that. Because as a painkiller, it's cutting off the nerve response to the flesh, and then consciousness has to leap beyond it. And in a way, it's kind of like a precursor to a near death type of experience. But we're losing more people to fentanyl, and we don't have to, because there's a way to reach these same states completely naturally. And I've had so many people who use my religious frequencies that I've decoded in the Bible, and taken them to help them get to that same place where they actually feel bliss for the first time since they can remember, since they were a kid. Because most of us, when we were a kid, not all of us, were able to feel it. you know, laughing with our friends and rolling over on the grass and just feeling so alive and connected to nature when our parents are at home. And I remember being on my bicycle with my brothers in Modesto, California, and just feeling so connected to everything, to the grass, the baseball field, all of it. All right, everybody. So next week we'll probably continue with and going more focused into the type of drugs people are attracted to because of there's a deficiency in them that they can't produce that same type of an experience without it. But there's a way to do it with breath and frequency and coherent practices that can take them to those same exact experiences. So,
David, do you know the answer to this question? I've been reading the Secret Gospel of John. Are there other teachings that corroborate this gospel?
well, the Secret Gospel of John, the Apocryphon of John, is yes, there are, because there's I think it's John 8:44 where Jesus is telling a group of Jews that they're worshiping a God who's a murderer and a liar God, and that murderer and liar God is revealed in the Secret Gospel of John as Yaltabeth, but although this God goes by many different names because he's a deceiver God, and he leads people into war and he leads people into battle. And Jesus is telling this group of Jews in John 8:44 that they've been deceived. They're not worshiping the real God, the infinite God. They're worshiping a liar who talks to them and tells them to do all these things that are corrupt. And it was the same thing with Elijah, the prophet Elijah, and the battle with Jezebel, the priestess, and the cult of the Baal, where the early Jews were worshiping once again a false god. So those things are corroborated in the prophets. They're corroborated in John 8:44, but it's the Secret Gospel of John is much deeper than that. And I did give a whole talk on it, and it is on my YouTube site where I spoke about the Apocryphon of John, the Secret Gospel of John. All right, everybody, have a great night. I just got to run with my kids. I have stuff to do with them right now.
I can send you the link, Lund.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great evening. If you have any questions, just you can call or text, or the phone number in the chat for you. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.